For the first time in nearly 90 years, an Alberta Premier is facing a citizen-led petition aimed at removing her from her seat. Some residents in Danielle Smith's riding of Brooks Medicine Hat are accusing the Premier of ignoring local constituents when forming new policies, adding that consistent engagement and genuine connections within the community have been absent during her tenure. Well, here's what the Premier had to say in response.
I think it's unfortunate because I believe it's an abusive process. I stand by every one of our MLAs. I think they're doing incredible work. I think we've got the support of the majority of Albertans on the agenda that we were elected to do, and I think the time to fight out these kind of policy differences are during a general election, which is scheduled for October of 2027. So I'll watch and see.
So for more on these citizen recall petitions, I'm joined this morning by Brendan Boyd, Associate Professor of Political Science at McEwen University. Good morning.
Morning.
Premier Smith is not alone in facing one of these petitions. There is a bit of a movement happening in the province right now. So for the rest of the country, can you explain what the citizens recall is and how it works?
Yeah, so this was something that was put in place by Danielle Smith's predecessor, Jason Kenney, of the same party. And basically, it allows for citizens to recall their MLA if they're unhappy with them. And it is a high bar. You have to have 60% of the total amount of voters who voted in the last election in that constituency, and then it would go to a plebiscite or a total vote on whether they would be removed, and then there would actually be a by-election if we got to that point. And so, yeah, this is something now that citizens, particularly in the fall, have taken up, and there's now 20 UCP MLAs that are facing a recall, and Danielle Smith, the Premier, is one of those.
If that petition were to prove to be successful, what would be the next step?
Yeah, so the next step would be an actual plebiscite where everyone in the constituency got to vote on whether the person should be recalled or not. And then if that went through, you need 50% or a straight majority there. And then it would go to a by-election where you would actually have like any other by-election for a new MLA.
Premier Smith has fought to make sure that Alberta was not only heard by Ottawa, but is putting that province's needs first. I grew up in Brooks. There are oil jacks everywhere. So what are the concerns not being addressed by that constituency?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to say because in a lot of cases, the recall has been, people have mentioned the use of the notwithstanding clause in regard to forcing teachers back to work. There was a teacher strike here for about 3 weeks. And here, so in Danielle Smith's case, of course, one of the challenges is that she's also the leader. And so leaders do typically have less time to spend in their constituencies. You might not see them as much if they're the Premier because they're also running the province. And so you get into this tricky thing. Danielle Smith talked about, well, you know, this is about a policy issue, whereas the residents or the people leading the petition said it's about a representation issue. But of course, drawing that line is a little bit challenging. There's a gray area in between there. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the crux of whether these things are actually being used as they were intended or what impact they're having.
It's an interesting argument, you know, when you look at the fact that there's a lot of constituencies that love to have a leader who's either in cabinet or the actual leader as their representative as well. As you mentioned, 20 UCP members are right now facing these recall petitions. That includes an NDP MLA. And we know in Alberta there's always a big rural-urban divide. But what does this 20 petitions out say about the state of politics in the province right now?
Well, I mean, I think it does say everyone is pretty engaged, that there is, you know, I think a lot of attention, maybe because of the teacher strike. There is definitely a lot of attention being paid. It also says that, you know, there is, I think the UCP party is not totally unique, but there is a strong base to that party that's very active. And oftentimes there's things that they care about, initiatives and policies that they're focused on that maybe the rest of the province isn't paying as much attention to or has a different take. And so, you know, the party is very focused on, and the Premier is very focused on the base of the party. They just had an AGM a couple of weeks ago, and, you know, trying to make sure that what happened to her predecessor, Jason Kenney, who was actually ousted by the party while he was a sitting Premier, doesn't happen to her. And so you definitely see that dynamic playing out across a lot of issues here in the province.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point that we should end on, the fact that this is a province that cycled through premiers at a pretty fast rate in the last sort of, I'd say, 6-year window. So what are you watching for most closely?
Well, the thing that I'm watching for is whether this MOU that was signed with Carney around not just the pipeline, but a bunch of different things related to energy changes. You know, in the spring, she was sitting at about 44% in terms of her approval rating. Just recently in October, the last one poll showed that she'd gone down to 38%. Is this the start of a trend where she has lower poll numbers, or there's a decrease, or is this a blip? And particularly the MOU that focuses on what a lot of people care about in the province, which is energy and thinking about a pipeline to the West Coast for more accessing more market. If that is the case, then if that has a big impact, then we'll see maybe this was just a blip as opposed to a longer-term trend.
Brendan Boyd, Associate Professor of Political Science at MacEwan University. Great to talk to you this morning. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
If you like that video, make sure to subscribe to the Your Morning YouTube feed, where you can find all kinds of new content posted every weekday morning.